Good afternoon. Today is July 9th, 2025, and this is the Board of Fire Code, the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. That's new for me, so excuse me. Can we have a roll call, Scott?
Willis. Patrice Zimmerman. Jim McVerter.
Here.
Austin Burton. Nope. Ann Weber.
Here.
And last seat is vacant. We have a quorum. Yep.
Thank you. Our next order of business is approval of the minutes. I believe everybody's gotten a copy of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
That's Tommy. The motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Patrice with the second. Ready?
You just do all ayes or just do a voice or a roll call?
Oh, we can do a voice. Show of hands. Everybody approve?
Approve. Approve. Yay.
Approved.
Looks like it's unanimous to me. Ready for our first case? So our first case today is BOAB 2025-00001. The appeal of Evan Sack, representing Taft Middle School, Independent School District Number 89, from a decision of the code official for non-compliance with Chapter 11, Section 1106. Scott, do you want to read the staff statement?
All right, so I'm going to paraphrase because there's quite a bit to it as far as the code goes, but the overall gist of it, of course, Taft School's existing school going through renovations in 3 phases. About probably 90% of the existing building will be demoed by the time this is all done, but there will be an existing kind of hallway section in the front. When all's said and done. They will have 3 new wings added in these 3 phases. The building code, of course, we start with the existing building code, which requires that any addition to a Group E occupancy, says where an addition is added to a Group E occupancy, the addition shall have a storm shelter constructed in accordance with ICC 500 and in accordance with Section 423 of the IBC for new structures. There are a few exceptions. Of course, none of those meet this. But then the required occupant capacity there as well is going to be typically the 5 square feet per person with 20 square feet per wheelchair individual. I don't recall off the top of my head how many that comes to, but the crux of the problem here today was that Phase 1 is going to be a new classroom wing. I believe Phase 2 was going to house the proposed storm shelter, mixed with was it a gym and some other elements. So the problem that we have here today, though, is that between those 2 phases, I think we had about a year and a half lapse, right? So the proposal is to, hold class and hold session, bring students in for that year period before we actually have a storm shelter in place. Okay? That's about the gist of it. I won't go through any more details unless we unless we need to.
Is there a representative from Taft Middle School that would like to, if you'd state your name and address for the record, please?
Hi,
Okay.
my name is Tori Butzer with Butzer Architects and Urbanism. Our address is 718 West Sheridan Avenue here in Oklahoma City.
My name is Evan Sack I'm also with Butzer Architects and Urbanism, also at 718 West Sheridan Ave in Oklahoma City. We're here today on behalf of Oklahoma City Public Schools. We have a few members of the Oklahoma City Public Schools staff in attendance in the audience, and also our construction manager, Lingo Construction Services, is represented in the audience as well. We wanted to start today again on behalf of the school district, just to kind of give some context or background briefly on the project and how we got to this point in design, and then ultimately open it up to questions as we covered most of what we'd like to kind of present today in our application itself. So to kick things off, context on the Oklahoma City Public Schools bond. Back in November of 2022, there was a bond vote for $955 million in bond funds that would be used to improve or add to the facility capacity for Oklahoma City Public Schools. Of these, there were 14 signature projects, Taft Middle School being one. At that time, we had several public presentations, which included the overall design of Taft Middle School, as well as the phasing or sequencing of the project that would help keep students active and educated on campus throughout the duration of construction. We are in that process looking to modify the existing school building, which of course 1931 does not have an ICC 500 compliant shelter on campus. But what we're looking to accomplish in the end is to provide a shelter that serves not just the Taft student population of today, but also the kind of maximum capacity staff and student population into the future of the campus. During construction, as Scott mentioned, there is this handover period where, because of some of the sequencing, which we can get into in more detail if helpful for the board, really we have basically a period of one school year where there will be a new academic wing open that accommodates just the 7th and 8th grade students that are attending Taft Middle School today, down from the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students who were on campus before construction. Those students will continue to shelter in the best available area of refuge, which is interior corridors and a basement that are existing as part of the campus or the original Taft Middle School structure until the completion of Phase 2, which introduces the ICC 500 compliant shelter capable of housing 2,000 students and staff. At that point, at the completion of Phase 2, that new ICC 500 shelter comes online and will be back into full compliance with the letter of the IEBC and IBC conjointly. I think that is really the kind of crux of what we're appealing and what we're asking today, is that the board consider the interpretation of the language of the IEBC and IBC for how we identify what that increase in intensity of use is defined, which is basically whether we view the new classrooms being added in Phase 1 as true additional occupancy or additional intensity of the campus because of that cap on population that the school district will hold in place in the interim, which is that we will cap the number of students on site to just the 7th and 8th graders instead of the full Taft population, the 5th and 6th grade currently being on their Linwood campus.
I just want to add, so the bottom line of what we're asking is for the continuation of this operation. The school continues to be in operation, and we're just asking for a continuation of that and their current use of their best area of refuge that they use today.
With that,
So-
I think we can open, for questions, sorry.
So
And is it helpful to go through the phasing diagrams, or no need?
Yeah, I think it would be to kind of give us as much background as you can. I did have one question, though. So after phase one, are you increasing the population of the school from what was there before?
No, sir. We will, so at present, like I said, before construction, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade attended Taft Middle School campus. At present, there are 579 students in their 7th and 8th grade classes that attend school there today. During this interim year of the changeover between phase one while phase two is being constructed, there will be 541 students, so down 38 from present day. And then by the time phase two is ready for occupancy and we have an ICC 500 shelter online, there are 531 students who are 5th and 6th graders today who will be rising to 7th and 8th grade that school year.
So the total population, though, say from 2 years ago, does not increase at the end of phase one on that campus.
Correct.
It actually drops by 30-some students.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Go ahead and tell us about the phasing.
So the phasing diagram's on screen, and there were additionally some renderings included with our application packet. Show kind of the development of the site. I think if you scroll up, something's happened to our text here.
Might
That's
be-
interesting. In the upper right image is basically the, yes, thank you. That plan is the campus as it exists today. So that would be the existing Taft Middle School building. You can see a wing there extending to, and orientation purposes, up is north on this drawing. So to the west, we have a small wing that housed a total of 10 classrooms, not too many other functions housed in that wing. Then you have the central kind of main body of the school. That's a primarily single story with a 2-story front that houses their gym, auditorium, some other sports-related functions, some electives, a few classrooms, things like that. And then you have the north wing, which houses the bulk of the classroom facilities on campus, as well as the cafeteria and kitchen for the existing Taft Middle School students. So really what we started with, if you'll scroll down just a little bit, our first phase looked at demolition of that west wing, so interrupting as few classrooms as possible and no kind of core functions that couldn't be immediately replaced by moving students to another campus. If you'll scroll down again, we have the new proposed west wing, so a much larger west wing with the intent that we provide both a cafeteria and kitchen, as well as the majority of the new classroom functions for Taft Middle School. So I believe there are 36 new classrooms in just this wing alone, along with the kitchen and cafeteria, with the intent that we replace the 10 we tore down in phase one demolition, as well as prepare for the demolition of that north wing ahead of phase two. Scrolling back up and over to the left a little bit, we see phase two demolition takes that north wing. So again, we've lost 50% of what were existing classrooms, as well as the cafeteria and kitchen. The plan just below this shows the addition of a new north wing. So that new north wing, again, provides our ICC 500 shelter, which is the competition gym function for students. So just a portion of this wing is the actual shelter. It's the rectangle in kind of the northeast corner of the new addition there. There are also functions like the new auditorium, a wrestling room, a few other kind of tributary functions that are part of Phase 2. Moving up and to the left again, we see Phase 3 demolition, which takes the remainder of the back portion of that building, so the gym and auditorium that were just replaced in Phase 2, come down as part of Phase 3 demolition, and just below that we see a minor addition to the back of that existing building, so we can retain that historic public face facing the intersection of Northeast 23rd and May, and then provide kind of those final classroom functions serving for things like electives or some arts, languages, other sort of special functions as our final move in Phase 3. At this point, at the end of the project, 5th through 8th grade students would be able to be housed on one campus instead of also having the Linwood campus operational. So the intent would be that with that new shelter and new capacity open, we'd be able to consolidate all students back to the Taft proper campus.
Question. In Phase 1, where are your best available areas of refuge located?
So the best available areas of refuge remain in the existing building. Yeah, I think there's a PDF with an excerpt of existing Taft plans instead of the excerpt of proposed. Yeah, those existing, that file is perfect, thank you. So if we scroll down, these first couple pages should be good to illustrate this. So this first plan is a partial lower level that exists on site. So there's quite a bit of fall in the grade as we move from west to east. So that's where this partial lower floor plan comes in.
How close to the construction is it?
So this is directly adjoining the construction. The two are disconnected from one another at the moment for purposes of sealing off the school during construction. They will connect to the corridors of the existing building once Phase 1 is complete. So scrolling down to the next sheet, here the plan has kind of been rotated, so apologies for kind of orientation, motion sickness here. But on that left side of the drawing is what was the west wing that comes down in the first phase of demolition. So that west wing is where our new academic wing would tie into the existing and give access to those interior corridors, and then access as well via the stairs in the existing building down to the basement.
Okay, the basement, are you using the basement as your best available area of refuge?
That is currently what the school uses as part of their best available area of refuge. The other part made up by interior corridors on the ground floor, which is the upper plan on this sheet.
So my question with the, it sounds like you have less students.
Yes, ma'am.
Would they all be able to fit in the basement?
That is not something we had investigated as to whether the school district would want to reduce it to just that lower level area being the area of refuge, but is something that we could consider.
But right now, they use the hallways as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would accommodate the entire 541 or whatever the population may be.
Do you have a square footage on the basement?
I don't know that we do on these drawings, but that is something we could provide.
Okay.
Scott, can you scroll up to the basement? It's the sheet above.
Which?
It's the
where is
lower
it?
level fire
Yeah,
exit plan.
Next page above. Yeah, that'll be our basement plan.
Well, that's below, that is below street level.
It is below grade on the left portion of this drawing. As you move to the right side of the sheet, we get closer and closer to the elevation of, like, let's say May Ave. So it is down below grade by about 2 feet, but there are window sills at maybe chest height in the cafeteria space that look out towards May Avenue.
So I want to state for the board here as well, for the interim occupant load of 541 students, you said, right?
Yes.
The required square footage for shelter would come out to roughly 2,750 square feet.
That sounds about right.
On your applicant statement, you identify the 3 construction phases. The phase 2 identifies when you're going to put that storm, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So part of the package that we were given were the letter exchanges to the city back and forth.
Yes, ma'am.
And in your letter, you had mentioned that there was a meeting on February 14th to discuss was that when you guys discussed the phasing to try and see if everybody was on the same page? Like, kind of describe what happened at that meeting.
Yeah, so this was some of our early efforts in conversation with the planning department and then kind of with development services as a whole. So previously we'd had meetings with just the planning department, I believe, or maybe there were 2 dates in there. The earliest meeting was with just planning. And then we went to meet with a larger group.
Yeah, it was February
Yes,
14th, and
Marshall.
then May 8th was like the bigger group,
Okay,
right?
yeah, so initially with the planning department, it was to talk about phasing in part, but largely because of like any complications with like issuing building permits or having multiple building permits active for a single address, and just to talk through like the right process for submitting applications for permit, submitting for certificates of occupancy, submitting for all the permits that are then tied to each building permit, like for new water lines or et cetera. So that was really the primary purpose of that meeting, but as part of it, yes, we were reviewing the phasing approach and sort of how we would continuously occupy the site and when each specific use would come online.
The phasing discussion, was that the one that was on May 8th? Where it was with everybody with,
Yes, in large part, it was the same discussion where we're talking about building or permitting process with the phasing being part of that presentation, yes.
so at that time, there wasn't any kind of discussion about the shelter?
Not at that point, no.
It was just
So-
more permitting?
Yes, we discussed when the shelter would come online in the sequence of construction, but no specific conversation about that being an issue for occupancy or.
But you mentioned it, like that it was
Yes, ma'am.
in phase 2,
Yes, ma'am.
and nothing was said about it?
We talked about it briefly, but only in the context of.
No, I mean, like, as in, was there a response by anyone, like, that had mentioned,
Not
like,
at
that might be a problem? So basically, we just reviewed all the design phases, and everyone was like,
Yeah,
Looks
we were
good.
moving forward, or moving towards, yes, submitting for permit, following that, like, that sequencing approach.
Okay.
For construction.
So in this drawing that we're looking at, the portion that's on the left is truly a basement that's below grade. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And then the portion on the right eventually daylights.
That is correct.
Okay. So, Scott, you were saying they needed about 2,500 square feet. 2,750.
2,750 roughly.
Yeah. I'm not I don't have any way to measure this, but that looks like it's probably easily 2,700 feet. The, is there anybody from the school proper that's here?
Yes.
Would you state your name and
Yes,
address?
my name is Deborah Tech. I'm the interim operating officer for the district.
Okay,
Our address is 2500 Northeast 30th.
okay. My question to you is, what operational plans does the school district have in the event of inclement weather, early warning and all that?
Normally, I'm going to answer the question really quick, and I want to go back and give you a little bit of a quick history, even with this board included, because this is not the first time that I stand up in front of this board. So yes, the operation for us is normally we have a safety department that goes to the meetings with the weather center. So they monitor throughout any possible storm events. We always try to cancel the night before. If we see that it's something that has the potential to develop, we will cancel school the day before. If it's something that we are monitoring when students are in session, we make the decision. The board had gave Dr. Polk, our superintendent, the ability during the day to make the decision if school needs to end early and those students need to be taken back, or if we only need to cancel after-school activities. So we do have a plan in place for that case of events. Mentioning about talking to the board before, this is something that as we start prepping for the bond in 2022, even before we went out for votes, we were taking the shelters into consideration. Back in 2013, when we had the weather events and the city started looking at shelters, we worked through with the city, with the MAPS office, and we added about 30 shelters since that time to now to our schools. Obviously, we have about 60-some properties. They're active because we have other properties that are not active schools at the moment. So during the planning of the bond, we came to the board because we have Capitol Hill High School at that point that we were trying to add some annex buildings at that point to be able to manage the construction. So in the end, we were not able to find the ability to do it. The students at Capitol Hill remain at Capitol Hill. The new building, if you drive down Walker, you are able to see the new building with the 2 storm shelters already in place. So during the planning of the whole bond, we have been working with the city and all the departments, not only developer services, but public work, the marshal's office. So some of the conversations, I'm glad that you brought up the meeting in February, because yes, we brought up in the information, because that was a project that started as we are going to demo the whole building. Through the process, the historical significance of the building was emphasized. We listened to the community, and that's what we started looking at phasing plans. So the main reason we needed to start with that side of the school is because the kitchen and the cafeteria are on the location where phase 2 is going to be located. So for operations, we need to have a kitchen. So we had to build that kitchen first. So that's why that first wing has the kitchen and the operations. It's also a 2-pipe school, so we needed to keep the system for the air conditioners available as well in order to separate the buildings. So that is also located on the phase 2. So that is what started the phasing for the district. So yes, the conversations started. We did talk with everyone. We told them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. When we went on campaign, we told all our buildings are going to be completed about the 14 around August of 2026, with the exception of Taft. So we made the community aware that this was a phase project because we had the understanding that, yes, it was going to be phased. So when we start working more into the actual permits, final permits, that's when the letter from the site development kind of come in. So it's not that we had not listened to the city, that we had not listened to this board and all the recommendations that they gave us before. It's that it's something that caught us on the middle of almost the project was already awarded. We were starting. Yes, we are retaining that basement of the building. Student, that is our best areas of refuge at the moment. The new area that is being built on that building number 1 will also have an area of refuge because it has a center core around it. The classrooms are on the perimeter, but it also has a center core. So that center core can be considered as well. But like you guys mentioned before, that basement, it should be at this point sufficient to have the students in place. That's why we had the Linwood building for the 5-6 students, which has one of the MAP shelters. So we have about 500 and some students there. And then at the new build, or the current, we call it Big TAF, we have about 550 students. We are not expecting to increase that enrollment. That enrollment is going to continue being that amount. So what we are looking for is to be able to continue the operation as we move forward with the project.
So just to clarify, when you went through the whole phasing description, there wasn't any kind of objection that the ICC 500 would be in the second portion?
No, and we even had the opportunity to join the city when they were looking at the modifications on the code. They were great working with us with the exceptions for the schools, for the 2018 adaptation, the adult changing tables. Those were conversations that we were able to take part of. So during this process, we have been presenting that, yes, we are going to be. It has never been a formal, here is your permit, we are moving forward, but they were conversations with the different departments. So the intent of the phasing plan with the shelter on the second phase has always been there for us.
So actually, it's not just one storm season, it's at least 2 storm seasons that you would be without a storm shelter.
Well, it has always been no storm shelter. The TAF building has no storm shelter to start with.
Agreed.
Right now, what we are asking is for the building will be completed for the August of 2026 school year. So we're not talking about next school year, we're talking about the following. We are coming ahead a year in advance.
So,
It's going to be one storm season.
So storm
Because it will be the
season
26-27 school year.
So the upcoming,
Phase 1 is under construction.
okay, so the upcoming season is 26. So are you saying by the beginning of August 26th?
August of 26 is when the students will be on the new addition. So that a new addition will be open on August of 26. So those 500 students will be within the main building and the new addition.
Okay, so August 26th, the storm shelter or
Will be completed by August of 27.
okay, so it's 2 storm seasons.
Well, if you look at the end of one and the beginning
Yeah, it's
of the
2
other
storm
one.
seasons.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at is
Yeah.
the potential for harm.
Correct.
Okay.
Will the Phase 2 demolition impact the existing basement area of refuge?
Yes. So, yes, it will. And I think to clarify, the best available area of refuge is not the entire basement as shown here. There's a series of arrows in kind of the knuckle of the building. Sorry to use the term. We have been using that for like the demolition kind of cutoff points. So right in there, there's a series of doors just to the right of your cursor. Those let you into the cafeteria space. That space is full of windows that look out onto May Ave. That is not currently, our understanding, is used as an area of refuge during a storm. That portion back to that kind of door at the knuckle itself will all be demoed as part of Phase 2 or ahead of Phase 2 construction. So that is our cut line for taking the northeast wing off of the existing building. So we'll be reducing that sort of alcove there, but the area outside the stair, that classroom that's labeled 004, the classroom labeled 002, those will all remain as part of the best available area of refuge. And actually, I should highlight also that at the north end of this drawing, Plan North, sorry, 006, yeah, right where your cursor is, that whole room is actually the boiler room, so that is also not included as area of refuge space on this lower level. It's an equipment room housing electrical panels and boilers, so.
You're
no
saying
student access.
006 is,
That is excluded from area that is accessed ever by students or really even staff of Taft Middle School.
The existing area of refuge would include room 002 and 004, and perhaps the hallways.
Yeah,
beyond that,
006 and
009.
009. Yeah,
And
that's
that will,
correct.
all those spaces will remain with
Large-
phase 2 demolition.
Yes, largely intact, save for that door north at the knuckle. So that's our cutoff point, so you're losing some amount of that corridor, yes.
Do we have any way to verify the size, or roughly verify the size of that rectangle?
Yes, we do.
Do we-
We don't have it today, but it's there and we can, it's still there and we can take measurements, so.
Now, and I'm still trying to get this straight in my head.
Yes.
The diagram to the right is what would be,
this will be what can be used for refuge.
right, but the building to the right is what's going to be demoed.
That goes away.
How would the students enter into this area if it's not attached?
Yeah, so into this area, that stair 007, it's, yeah, kind of fuzzy, but that stair connects you up into the main area of the rest of the building. So because this is below grade, it's still connected through,
No, this is going
through
back.
that stair alone.
Right, but I mean, while they're using this building, they will come down and go across
Since
the
we
existing
know that it shows stairs on that basement, the first floor of the building is also have some hardened areas available for students that are not able to take the stairs. But we also have procedures about how to move students that cannot go down the stairs on their own.
How much hardened area, you mentioned some area of refuge, was proposed with phase 1? I understand it's not ICC 500, but do you have a approximation or a graphic that could show those
Yeah,
portions?
we could provide one. I don't have that figure offhand, but it's a similar setup to the main body of this school where there are some exterior classrooms with, windows for daylight and views and what have you. But the interior corridor spaces and things like restrooms could be used, yes.
I'm confused a little bit, I apologize, about, want to back up to the basement area. Is that basement still utilized? I
It
was a
is.
student there, and I think they called it the Sooner Room or something, and it was a meeting place of the morning, a social place. Am I correct with that? Does anybody else go to Taft? Just me?
Yeah, that area right there, yes, we do have classrooms right there. We had renovated through the years and also through the MAP process. There was a big MAPS renovation at Taft as well a couple of years ago. So that area, those are regular instruction classrooms just outside that cafeteria area. It looks very different than probably way back
So,
then.
I'm confused why that would not be where you would want students to be with the tornado instead of a hallway that never works.
Well, it's part of that area. So part of that area that you're mentioning, it is what is included. What he mentioned that is excluded is kind of the cafeteria side because that part is going to be demo with the phase 2. But the
I
area that you're
understand
talking
that.
about, that dark, at some point it was
Yeah,
dark
I
basement.
understand that.
We have renovated and that is still available and it's going to be available through the whole construction.
I'm trying to visualize it. It's been a few years since I was there.
And you're always welcome
I
after
started
we
dyeing my
finish
hair
this to come
platinum since
visit.
then. But what kind of, I'm just wondering why that wouldn't be a good protector, or did you say there's windows there, or what's the
There is
structural
no windows. is what we said.
component for the ceiling of that basement? Do you know that?
Yeah, so that basement is, as you said, underneath that main floor of the school. And so our ceiling structure in this area is the cast-in-place concrete structure that's been there since 1931. I think the main reason for using that upper hallway as area of refuge space historically has been that additional grade of students that had been on site. So this was a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade campus pre-construction. So I think just capacity in the basement may not have been sufficient for 840 students, but you know, is something that could work for 2 grades.
There's still a swimming pool there?
No swimming pool.
Do they still make cinnamon rolls of a morning? No, I'm just kidding.
I cannot attest to the cinnamon rolls, but.
Hey, you all don't know, you didn't go to school there. I'm trying to help you
It
here.
sounds like we should have.
Yeah.
So the roof structure of the Phase 3 portion, that's going to be demolished there,
Yes.
behind the historic section. If you'll scroll down just a little bit, Scott, the rectangle that's kind of that part right there is going to remain, that entire rectangle, right?
Yeah, just the corridor and everything that is planned south of
Oh,
the
okay.
corridor, yes.
So when you look at the plan just to the top of that, the first floor plan,
Yes.
there's a basement under there, and that floor covers that entire basement area that we've been talking about
Yeah.
as refuge.
If you see those stairs on the right side,
Yeah.
those are the stairs that take you to the basement, just for context on, or reference on size and scale of what that basement area actually is.
Oh, excuse me. I thought I turned my mic.
Bless you.
So if you go back down to the plan, the basement plan, please. So that stair that's on the left side there is really the stair that you were just pointing to on the right?
That's correct.
Okay. So again, above rooms 02, 04, and 06, there's not only, there's a first floor structure plus a roof.
I believe over top of O2, there is the main floor structure and a second floor. By the time we get to room 04, we're past the grid lines where there is that third story, basically.
But there's at least another floor and a roof.
That is correct, yes. At least one more floor.
So 06, since it's a boiler room, is it going to be operational during the time the renovations are happening?
Yes, it is operational through the end of Phase 2. Or there's a handoff period over a summer where that room 06 is demolished as phases 1 and 2 have been completed.
So essentially what we're talking about then is you're here asking us if in the interim period for the 2 seasons that we're going to have possible weather, that this area that we're talking about, 04, 02, the 2 quarters, if that can substitute or be considered how it's being used historically anyway, the best area of safe refuge for the students that will be occupying Phase 1, because Phase 2, or the wing on the right here, is going to be demolished as soon as Phase 1 is done, right? So you're asking us during that interim period, can we continue to use the historic area for the new construction until the new ICC 500 structure is built, which we think, give me a timeline, 2 years?
Yeah, so if helpful, I included the timeline we had talked about in our pre-construction meetings and everything in the applicant statement. So what we are looking at is through August of 2027, which is this coming school year, we will still be constructing Phase 1. The year after that, we construct Phase 2, and it opens in August of '27. That we allow the existing use to continue, or the existing approach for sheltering in place during a storm to continue.
And during that period, there will be actually a reduction in the number of students by, say, 30 students or so.
Yes, that's what we expect based on enrollment numbers today. I don't think we could commit to an exact figure in case there are students held back or students that transfer in and out, but the figure today of those 5th and 6th graders that will be, or 6th and 7th, sorry, that will be rising 7th and 8th graders is 541 students, yes.
And during this time, the school district has a plan that if a known weather system is threatening within the next 24 hours, school will not be held.
That is correct. And we have an emergency management department that also manage doing all the safety. Also, the students know where they need to go in case of an emergency, but proactively, we have a policy in place that we will cancel school when there is some weather conditions coming.
Where is that plan documented?
I can ask our emergency planning services to provide it. It readjusted every year. So at this point, they are readjusting for the new school year, and they are waiting for decisions here for them to start working through. But they will normally finalize by the first week of August, so we can provide that to the city. That is no problem. And we'll show you exactly the areas that we'll use for the refuge and what is the square footage, because all that needs to be submitted.
And the last question I have for you, between phases, is there any foreseen condition where the project would stop and Phase 2 would not be completed in the time frame you told us today or delayed?
Well, we can not control acts of gods or any changes with the legislation or anything like that. We have been very fortunate that our bond passed ahead of time, so we were able to go out for bids, and we have all our bids in place for all phases of the project. So we don't have to come back and get phases. That's an issue that we have seen because other projects had increased in cost, so they have been stopped for that. On our case, it will be if something happens when they are building, and they discover a condition that we have no way to see it until we start the demo, that will be what can cause a delay.
So the bond's in place, the money's in escrow?
The money is in place and the money is already approved, yes.
You mentioned all phases have been bid. Has Phase 2 been awarded? Yep.
Yes, Lingo Construction is our construction management company, and we have awarded all phases of the project.
Great.
I'm still, again, I understand, the cutoff between when we start providing the ICC 500 requirements and stuff. And as we've seen in Texas, it can have
Yes.
devastating.
Anything can happen in the blink of an eye. Yes.
So I would myself like to see more of what the square footage of the availability would be. Maybe looking at a variance in the number of people that could be put in there, because I believe that time limit is 2 hours for storm shelters. But that area is going to stay there until the completion of Phase 2, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The area is going to be going to stay there. And like I said, this is a basement area. The first floor with its ground level is also going to be available. So if you see around the auditorium, you have hallways on that area that in case of emergency, someone cannot make it to the basement or we need more square footage, that first floor of the existing building is available. And then we are not even taking into consideration the new building.
Right.
That the first floor of the new building will have some square footage as well that can be considered a hardened area or a best area of refuge. So we have basement is plan B, first floor of the existing building is Plan B, and then first floor of the new addition is Plan C.
Do you have any data on or approximations on how often the basement has been used as an area of refuge? Is it
Every
more
time
for
that
drills?
Every time that we do a drill, yes, they use that area, so the students are used to use that area. Like Eva mentioned before, when we have over 800 students, some went to the basement, some went to the first floor. So right now, because the enrollment permits, we have the ability to just use the basement. But yes, they do the mandatory drills. We also have additional drills in places that we know is needed. And because we have an active construction, those are things that we take into consideration as well.
Does your emergency management plan also address individuals that could not manage the steps, handicap?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that would be in your emergency
That will be on the
management plan?
emergency plan. And like I said, we submit emergency plans every year before school starts. So they are in the process of finalizing those as well.
Okay.
Is there a reason why you couldn't put together an engineered plan about the basement being your place of safety, refuge, whatever you want to call it, in case of a tornado or severe inclement weather, and present that back to the city? If they did that, Scott, they wouldn't really need a variance from us if they could prove that they were meeting standards of FEMA or somebody like that. Is that the case, or am I wrong?
No, I mean, if they could prove that the existing hardened shelter area met ICC 500, then no, this would all be kind of a moot point, as long as they had the square footage for the occupant load they need.
Well, I will say that I don't know if it's a way to prove that the basement meet ICC 500 because it was built in 1931, so no one had an idea of that type of need. We can say that to the current code where you don't have a shelter, you use your hardened areas or your best area of refuge. So under the current code, if we'll say we are not doing anything to the building, we are not doing an addition, that building can stand there for 100 more years without a shelter and it still meet the code. So that is what we're trying to see, that yes, we are doing our best effort. We had about 30 shelters doing maps. We have about 17 shelters on this bond, and hopefully we have another bond and we are able to get all properties at that point. But it's a slow process.
Sure.
But the area at the basement, like you mentioned, it is the best area of refuge for those 500 students.
Right, and in my mind, my point is that I don't think it would be difficult to get that approved through the right engineer and all that, because with all due respect, this has been in place since 2 elementary schools went down in Moore, and there were fatalities. 2 of us in the room have had a grandson and a son in those elementary schools that survived, fortunately, and dug out. So I'm just not a big proponent of hallways. And whenever these come before us, and with all the knowledge of superintendents and architects, engineers in Oklahoma, we all know this. And why come present this? Because I will always vote no on it, just because of the safety issue. But it seems so simple for you to do that. Yeah, you may spend 30 days doing that, but you would be covered, in my opinion, and not have to rely on a hallway that, I don't care how many years it's been there, they collapse.
Yes, and we can work it through and present the square footage and the space back if needed. But even doing the presentation, I don't think that the site development is going to approve it because it is not an ICC 500, even if we can prove that that is the best area of refuge. So yes, we can do all the process, but in the end, we will end it up here again because it's not going to get approved.
So you've
and
had
Scott, just let me know if I'm not reading the code right, but I believe that's my interpretation.
You've had engineers tell you that that basement would not meet the standards that you need for safety.
I can say with confidence that that basement does not meet if we're talking about the ICC 500 standards, it would not meet their code requirements, mostly because it is attached to the rest of the building and not structurally separate, where the rest of the building could blow away in a storm, leaving only the basement behind. There's also impact rating requirements, a 2x4
Oh, yeah,
at 250 miles
understand.
an hour. These are things that would not be verifiable, or we just don't have enough information about the existing structure to say with confidence that someone would stamp drawings that say that meets the ICC 500 standards. So that's why we have not pursued that route of speaking to its certification.
I just have a lot of faith in modern-day testing and modifications that might not be near as expensive as you getting outdoor storm shelters that we've required before.
Sure.
You know, and people pay thousands of dollars for those, and I'm just having a difficult time. I was in that building 2 years, so I know that's where we bought our school supplies.
Yes, sir.
Can you reiterate why phase one could not contain the shelter? I think you mentioned it before, but just
So
the reasoning behind it.
mainly phase one couldn't contain couldn't act as the shelter use case, in part because of what that ICC 500 requirement entails as far as, if openings do exist in that exterior wall, they have to meet those same impact and ballistics requirements. So you'd have no daylight in the classrooms. There's really no way for those sort of real functions of serving as an academic space to pair up well with the needs of that ICC 500 performance criteria.
And maybe to walk it back a step further and ask very well, why were the phases not flipped where the shelter was built first, perhaps?
Yeah,
So,
and-
I think you addressed it before. I just wanted to
Sorry,
make sure
yeah,
understood,
I think I misunderstood your
No
question, but
problem.
yes, that, the reason there is just because of sequencing of when we needed to replace certain critical functions on campus. So the gym and shelter space could not be swapped to serve as the West Wing, actually because of some zoning requirements related to height of the building, use case, and its proximity to the surrounding neighborhood, and then the placing the classroom wing in the north. If we took the north down first, largely the cafeteria and kitchen would be the issue, but more importantly, the number of classrooms that the campus would lose with the demolition of that north wing would preclude like any classroom or education services being provided on campus. It's half of the available classroom space at the moment, so.
And were any scenarios looked at to relocate a larger number of students? Say if you were taking all the students away during phase one, was that looked at from a superintendent's
Yes,
perspective?
I think that was certainly a discussion early on, was whether construction could happen without students on campus. I think that was certainly a discussion early on, but not deemed feasible at the start of the project.
Yeah, we did look at it, having all the students move away, but at that point it was not feasible, and because we thought that we were going to be okay moving forward with the phasing plan, at that point we just continue moving with the phasing plan. For us, if we had to displace the students, it's kind of double fold. First, the students are coming out of a community again, but we need to find a building that has a shelter for over 500 students. So that is what becomes the issue. So we will start to look for what are the possibilities where those students can be displaced to, because we have a shelter where we had the 5th and 6th graders, but that was an elementary school. These are middle school students, so we will have to do an extensive renovation in there to move more students to be able to use that shelter. So by the time we do the repairs and everything else to bring them up to speed, it's about the same time of the frame of the construction. And like I said, yes, we did took into consideration move the students, but we were kind of confident that we will be able to face the project with the information that we have previously received.
Scott, can you tell us from the city's perspective why Phase 1 was permitted to start construction without this
I don't
being
think-
resolved?
I don't think we've issued Phase 1, is that correct?
We have a permit. It is issued with a TCO, one of those conditions being that we provide a shelter on site before a
Before it
permanent
opens.
certificate of
Yes, okay.
occupancy
Yeah, we
can
haven't
be
got the
issued.
certificate of occupancy yet.
Yeah, so it was granted as a way to let us still start construction on time while we sort through what the plan is for this shelter component.
Yeah, we try to provide the opportunity in case this board ruled in favor,
Yes.
but yes, like I said, knowing that there were 3 phases, I remember a meeting back at the fire marshal's office. It was discussed, the fact that the storm shelters were in Phase 3 or Phase 2.
Phase
Okay,
2.
That was brought up and discussed. We discussed, briefly, I think a couple of options. You know, do you have room on site for temporary shelters, such as we've seen at other locations, Aztec schools and others? But I think you have a lay-down yard for your construction equipment and all that that's going to be taking up the bulk of it.
Yes.
We went through a few options like that, but there's,
Yeah, and that was our conversation at the fire marshal's office in, I think that was November of just this last year, 2024. We were meeting to discuss sequence of construction from a fire separation standpoint between what are essentially 3 separate buildings by code. And as part of that, again, going through phasing this concern about storm shelter. We did review a few options, the primary of which being those temporary shelters, as Scott mentioned. And yes, we did not, in the end, have any success pursuing temporary shelters on site due to the nature of how tight the facility is already with, students attending, parents doing pickup and drop off, construction, deliveries and operations, and then as well as, just keeping the site secure and safe for students to actually be attending during construction. So.
Any other questions?
What was your plan if this board did not approve what you're bringing to us today? Plan B.
Yeah, I think. I'll let you speak to it.
It's okay. At that point, our cabinet will need to combine and see what the alternatives are and start looking at the possibilities of trying to find other buildings that had the shelter that we can use as an educational facility.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Does the fire marshal have anything to say?
I was comfortable just sitting there. Mike Wilson with the Oklahoma City Fire Marshal's Office. Our biggest concern, obviously, is that the first phase is to build what I heard was 36 classrooms, and they won't have any shelters. Now, if the existing building, you look at the square footage, and that basement can hold the occupant load of the whole school, normally they would just have to provide shelter for what they're building. But they're trying to use the existing building, as part of that shelter for now. And then in the next phase, they'll have a shelter that is large enough for the entire school on the east side of the building. But for that year, for that 1 year, you would have that issue. Obviously, our bigger concern is the spring and early summer, when the storm season kind of is. And it's good that the school is recognizing that and is going to have some operational constraints on what they're going to do if there are severe weather days, which we have gotten more and more comfortable with them being able to predict those things. I would like to see those same numbers of how big of an area is that? Can they get all those students in there that they're going to have? Because it won't be the total number because they're still rearranging things and students are on another site at Linwood where they have a storm shelter. And if it works out, we're more comfortable with that there will be a place for them to go. In this third phase, which will happen for the center area, then the people on the west side would have to go outside to get to the storm shelter on the east side of the building. But that's acceptable. Nothing in the code that requires you to even be covered. You know, that's how you can get to a safe place, as long as you have a safe place to get to. So we understand there's issues. I wish they would have built a storm shelter first. I wish it was part of the 36 classroom addition, you know, but that's not the way it worked out with construction phasing and their constraints they have on timing. So that's really only our concern. We do have that 1 year from August of 26 to August of 27 that we would need to use this temporary situation as far as a shelter. So we would like, if the numbers work out the way they should, based on how many students and staff they will have in that 1 year, because obviously the next year it'll be greater because there'll be more classrooms and they'll be able to have them all in the new shelter. So that's on our opinion on it.
I'd like to just bring up the fact that the travel distance, according to 2018 IBC, cannot exceed 1,000 feet.
I honestly don't know how far that is
I'm sure they're under 1,000.
from.
Are they under 1,000?
I know the diagonal from one corner of the building to the other is 408 feet as the crow flies, but I don't know offhand what the travel distance would be.
If that's the diagonal, it probably would
Should be
comply
within
with 1,000.
feet.
Yeah.
Can I state one thing as far as plan review would be concerned in the future if that was approved? If this hardened basement area would be allowed as a storm shelter after phase 1 is complete, between that and phase 2, the 1,000 feet is correct, but do you have a proper path for that? They can't go through construction, obviously, there's those hazards.
Right.
Can you speak on that briefly?
So I think what we would, yes, in short, there is a path from that west wing to the entrance of the north wing and into the shelter that would be considered an accessible route. What we have not, I think, resolved completely is whether that would be internal to the building, traveling through like basically a protected tunnel as part of the renovation of that central core, or if it would entail travel outside the building. So that really comes down to some construction logistics that we're working on identifying as part of the construction sequence. But yes, there would be an accessible route from that west wing to the entrance. Can't speak confidently on measuring that path at 1,000 feet from, distance in the west wing, but we could get that information.
And for the decision before the board today, it doesn't have that dynamic of access from phase 1 to phase 2 while phase 3 is under construction. That's not something we're reviewing today, correct? We're just looking at, can phase 1 have a certificate of occupancy while phase 2 is still under construction, right? We're not looking into phase 3 at this point?
Depends how we make the motion.
Okay. Okay. I was going to ask Mr. Wilson before you sit down, from a ICC 500 perspective, is there allowance for basements to serve as a shelter that you're aware of, or have you seen an approved ICC 500?
There's really no restriction in ICC 500 about where it can be.
Okay.
It could be on the top floor of a high-rise building.
Sure.
But structurally, that would be very difficult to do.
Understood.
Basements are going to be much easier to comply with the structural aspects that are needed for a compliant ICC 500. We are more concerned with the structural aspects than the plumbing and all the other stuff that is part of the required ICC 500 shelter. We just want a safe place for them to go for 30 minutes while the storm goes through. That's what we have here, is just a short-term event that, it's over with very quickly.
And my question stemmed from the perceived fear after the more events of flooding of a basement and that sort of thing. So being a basement subterranean level below the street, that's where I was coming from.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that the basement has a poured in place, a floor above it, which is going to help. If it had bar joists or two-by construction, which a lot of old buildings do, it would be a lot harder to, I guess, accept that as a safe place for them to be, if the top floor is trying to come down.
Yeah.
But the way it was built back in, what was it, 1930?
31, yes.
31, yeah. That's the way they built it back then. So it's a stout building.
Too young.
Any other discussion?
So, to be clear, we will have the spring of 2026 and the spring of 2027. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Two storm seasons.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know that this board is set on precedents, what we've approved in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the stuff that we've been presented with has been a do-it-by-spring type of scenario, correct? I think that's generally the premise of there was, circumstances that they couldn't do it in the summer, get it done by the first spring storm season, and that is how I think we've done a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
I think this is the first one where we're saying, okay, let's go 2 storm seasons with an exception. So we're kind of setting a precedence here of what this board is doing if we were to go forward with allowing this.
So can I jump in here as well?
Yeah.
I think we've got the dates confused. I mean, at least on the paperwork, if I'm reading it right? Phase 1 ends in August of 26.
That is correct.
Phase 2 ends August of 27. So there'd be a 12-month difference without a storm shelter, right?
But
Right, and sorry, that's the reason I came up, because it was what you had said earlier. I'm sorry. I'm Gary Jewell. I'm Director of Capital Projects. So we are already, this next school year, working legally within the permit that we have applied for to be occupying the school just the way it's been for the last so many years, that they are sheltering in place just where they're at. So until August of 26, we are meeting all the rules, guidelines, and everything else as the permitting office say. Permit was issued to us that way. So what we're here for appeals is just that following year. So what we're looking to you guys is for the next year ruling. Nothing will change from that year than what we're doing this coming year. There's still, this next year, if something comes up and they are at school, they will shelter in place where they've been sheltering in place for the last so many years, okay? And that's already approved through this permit. It's just the following school year is what we're asking for this bill. But even then, they're gonna do the same thing that year that they have done this last year and the years previous to it. So we're just asking to, if this phase 1 was a 3-year construction, okay? We wouldn't be asking for this appeal until after that 3 years over with. It would just taken that long to do it. We're just asking for a 1 year. We're just asking for it a year early.
Yeah.
Because you're not bringing those 16 new classrooms into service
Okay.
until August.
Yes,
But
that's correct.
construction is happening during that time.
Yes.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion? You care if I make a motion?
Go ahead.
So I'll make a motion to allow Taft a temporary CO, or a temporary occupancy, I'm sorry, a C of O, for the 1 year between the completion of Phase 1 and the completion of Phase 2, using the historical areas of best refuge at the facility. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I'm allowed to suggest an alternate motion, or we need to vote on that one first.
I think you
We
have
need
vote on
to
the first.
either vote on it or do away with it. I can either retract it or...
Stephen,
Oh, I was going to second it. Can I second it?
say that again.
In order to vote on the motion, you need a second.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I haven't heard a second on the motion to begin with.
I'm going to second that
Okay.
motion.
So I have a motion made by me and a second from Ann. You want to call the vote?
Okay. Kyle Lombardo?
Yes.
Yes. Tommy Willis?
Yes.
Patrice Zimmerman?
No.
Jim McWhorter?
No.
Austin Burton?
No.
And Ann Weber?
Yes.
So it's a tie. Who breaks the tie?
Just for clarity, tie loses. You need a majority.
All right, so the motion fails. Did you have an alternate motion you wanted to make?
Yes, I would make a motion.
Are we allowed to take a second motion after that one fails?
You can move until dinner time.
My heart's
Absolutely, yes,
content,
sir.
right?
I would make a motion, if allowed, to request the applicant to provide the square footage of the existing basement that would be considered area of refuge, as well as corridors in Phase 1 for our review.
And in addition to the emergency plan.
Would that just be a continuance?
Yes, with perhaps guidance, which is fine to build into the motion, but if you're wanting to put a pin in it, get more information and bring it back, that would be, you can describe what you want and move it to
As a
continue.
continuance, yeah.
So I'd make a motion to continue with that additional information requested for our review.
Is that, are you in agreement that you would be willing to continue the deal and come back?
Yes, we,
I mean, you're not in a time crunch apparently.
no,
this time.
we do have some time. Yes, we would be amenable to bringing back additional information for this board to consider.
So we need to vote on the motion. Since it's a motion to continue, we
You
need to vote.
do. First, you need a second on the motion to continue, and
I
then,
second.
thank you.
Okay,
So then you-
I have a motion from Austin, second from Patrice.
Okay, so is a motion to continue the case?
Continue the case.
And to require the provision of the square footage of the existing basement and hallways in Phase 1, as well as the, what do you call it, the
Pardon?
emergency action plan?
Yes, the emergency action plan.
Okay.
You want to call the vote?
Okay. All right, Kyle?
Yes.
Tommy Willis?
Yes.
Patrice Zimmerman?
Yes.
Jim McWhorter?
Yes.
Austin Burton?
Yes.
Ann Weber?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So we will see you soon.
See you very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That just seems like enough for today, doesn't it?
Sneeze again.
Gotta find my cases, sorry.
It's the bestest boy. You're the bestest boy.
Do you want to put up the cases there?
Such a bestest.
God, I've lost my place.
Some type of structural review.
Ah. Voila.
If you were analyzing bridge issues.
So the next case is BOAB 2025-00002. The appeal of Trey Maston, Capitol Hill Apartments, from a decision of the code official for noncompliance with Chapter 3, Section 302.7, with supplement of the International Existing Building Code 2018. Scott, you want to read the staff analysis, please?
If I can find it again here.
I'll give you a minute. I know what that's like.
All right, so the applicant's request, and this is for three separate Board of Appeals, but they're all pretty much the same issue. I don't think there's really any difference between the three, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we've got three Board of Appeals items here. The applicant's request pertains to the requirement for fire suppression as is required by the IBC, Section 903.2.8. This is originally referred to by the IEBC, Existing Building Code, Section 302.7. So these structures, these are level 2 and 3 alterations, existing residential uses. They've been there for quite some time. I don't recall how long, but
1932.
1932. But we do have level 2 and 3 alterations, and this IEB section 302.7. It's an amendment created by Oklahoma City years ago. I can't tell you how long. I think Mike may know, but it more or less requires that any time a building permit is pulled, that portion of the structure must be brought into compliance with the IBC for fire suppression and fire protection systems, as if it were new. At least that fire area is kind of how we've defined it. So that is the, kind of the gist of this problem. I think the applicant, you're here contesting against the requirement for fire suppression.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, that is where we're at.
Okay, I see the applicants at the podium. Would you state your name and give us your address for the record, please?
Yes, Trey Maston, and the address for the...
Your business address?
It's 4616 Northwest 59th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
You want to tell us a little bit about your projects?
Yes. So board members, fire marshal, city staff, thank you for your time today. My name's Trey Maston. I'm the owner of the 3 Ward 4 properties under review today. Each was previously slated for demolition and is now being rebuilt for families. These buildings were a nuisance for years with repeated violations and safety concerns. I took them on to restore them responsibly. The work is fully permitted, privately funded, and carried out by licensed professionals in coordination with city staff. We are here today requesting a continued use of the Chapter 13 performance compliance method. This method is made under Section 1301.2 of the IEBC, which allows the use of Chapter 13 as an alternative prospective code compliance. We're asking the board today to approve the scoring path that has been put in front of them as an equivalent. The technical scoring and code compliance details will be addressed by the representatives that I have with me today. I want to speak briefly to the broader purpose of this project and the means for the community. These are 12 homes under construction across 3 buildings. Each is intended to provide stable, affordable housing for families in Ward 4. Oklahoma City is currently short more than 37,000 affordable units. These homes directly contribute to addressing that shortage. The Chapter 13 method does not lower the bar. It provides a measurable, structured way to ensure life safety, fire protection, and egress. This project exceeds the scoring threshold in all three areas. Additionally, I have reached out to our council member, Todd Stone, in that ward and have shared the plans. And he has also spoken with my team and supports the project. He understands the compliance path we are taking and believes that this is the correct use of the city's adopted code. He supports reflected confidence in both the process and the purpose behind it. The scoring confirms the compliance. The process has been followed. Without approval, this work halts, and 12 much-needed affordable homes in Ward 4 potentially will be left unfinished, despite being permitted, code compliant, and already under construction. I respectfully ask the approval so this work can continue safely and within code. And thank you. And I also have some photos of what this project that I took on in the condition that it was before. I'd like to share with you all.
Yep, they've got a copy.
Okay, awesome. And if you have any questions, I'd be open to answer what I'm able to answer. If not, I'll defer to the representatives I have with me today.
And Kyle, jump in. Let me clarify one aspect on the staff report here also. So this particular Oklahoma City amendment, again, that requires the structure to be brought up to code, the location of that amendment is held within Chapter 3 of the IEBC, which is a provision covering all three compliance methods that the IEBC covers. So it would also encompass this Chapter 13, which is the points-based system, kind of chapter.
So my understanding is that you have these previously single-family residents, and we're turning them into quads?
These buildings have been quads since 1932, just has been zoned R1 residential. So we're not changing the use of what they have been. So under my understanding and my representation's understanding, they are non-conforming in their current use and their future use as well with what we will be using them for. So the occupancy is not changing in the sense of total square feet, occupancy load, or building height, or in any form of fashion. We are just doing a level 2, level 3 rehabilitation of all of these properties.
But the key is the occupancy is not changing because they're fourplexes now, or they have been in the past, and they're going to remain fourplexes, correct?
Correct, yes, and I've reached out to a city official, I don't have it in front of me, in that department, clarifying that these have been used as multifamily since they have documentation on them.
Mike, do you want to speak to the changes in the code as it pertains to fourplexes over the last?
Mike Wilson with the Fire Marshal's Office again. Oklahoma City was very intentional on putting this amendment in the code that whenever a permit is required for these residential uses, they have to sprinkle. We've done that for decades now. And if we had not changed the code, they would be correct that I've only had one other person ever try to use the score, and they were giving themselves points for all kinds of things they didn't have. But this would be the second time I've actually seen a score sheet where someone tried to use that section. For our part, mostly because of our local amendments, you have to sprinkle. They don't really need to use that score sheet for any other purposes. IEBC addresses egress and fire ratings and other things separately, in the chapters in the IEBC. But apartments and condos and any kind of residential use are actually the biggest problem that we have for life safety and injuries, both on the firefighters and on the occupants. And putting the fire out early is essential to a residential occupancy. The times you have, anytime you have, significant injuries or deaths, is because they're usually in the room of origin where the fire started, so they couldn't get out. Or the fire becomes so large that they can't get to the exit. And the good thing about the residential sprinkler systems, they are a life safety system. We've made them where they're cheaper to put in than the commercial stuff you see in office buildings and retail stores, that type of thing. But they are life safety, and they put the fire out early. And we have found that when we do have fires in sprinkled buildings, the sprinklers puts it out. And all we're going there then is to turn the water off and mop up. We have done this for, again, like I said, for decades, and feel it is essential for residential occupancies.
Have you reviewed their data for all the score sheet? Did you review any of that to see if it would actually comply with?
I didn't review theirs, no.
Okay.
I hadn't even looked at the plans, because as a rule, these are remodels, and the fire department really doesn't look at remodel permits.
Okay.
We're looking at new construction. We will look at the sprinkler system design when that comes in, or fire alarm designs, but as far as the building permit goes, we generally don't look at them at all.
And that's because 3027 supersedes it all, is that?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't doubt that the score may pass. I didn't look at it, though, specifically to see if those numbers are correct.
Okay.
But because of our local amendments, we have made it very specific that in the residential occupancies, you've got to put sprinkler systems in.
Yeah. And local can be more stringent than higher level.
The state code,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Are you all willing to put the sprinkler systems in?
At this point in time, both feasibility, operationally and economically, we have found a path to safety that works in all of those three categories that I've mentioned, but right now, it just does not make any operational sense or economic sense for me to continue on based on what my licensed professionals and construction company has scoped out of what that entails at these specific properties. Now, I would like...
Have you priced them out?
Yes, we have.
What do they come out for?
So in total, that's going to run me about $70,000, and we're talking across all three buildings. Again, we're not trying to get away from safety. I mean, we are bringing these back to life in every manner that I can think of, from updated electrical, framing, I mean, from head to toe. But we took this project on with the sense of following IEBC, this compliance method, not sprinklers, not to deplete life safety, but to meet it just through a different path.
So when you said the 70 grand, is that per building?
It's in total.
In total?
Yes.
Okay.
And then ongoing operating costs, right? Because with that requires monitoring systems.
I'm sure you already know this, but the code just is not the IBC. It's the IBC plus the amendments.
Correct.
And I'm sure you're professionals.
Yeah, and again, I really prefer my team to kind of speak to these questions as they're more suited to answer these.
While they're coming up, I can stay from the plan review side. I mean, I did go through the score sheet myself. In my understanding of Chapter 13, it does comply.
Yeah. And also, yeah, I did, that's one of the things I requested was the methodology, and that is signed, I mean, the methodology is signed by a professional engineer, so that was evaluated. But I don't think, I don't think that's the question. I think that, as Mike says, in my opinion, there's a reason why that's been amended. And Oklahoma City has specifically amended this for a very specific reason. It's because of the inherent dangers with these types of occupancies.
So coming to the board, we would be choosing to override or give exception to the Oklahoma City.
Yes, to me, I think the only workaround is, I think, minor work. There's a provision for minor work,
Okay.
Which I think that we would probably agree that that's not what this is.
Yeah.
So,
Would you state your name and address, please?
Sure, thank you. My name's Johnny Blassingame. I'm with the Rudnicki firm here in Oklahoma City. My address is 6303 Waterford Boulevard, Suite 2020. We just moved there from another building in the complex a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still getting used to that. We're here in Oklahoma City. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the resolution that adopted this portion of the code and the interplay between 302.7, which the staff analysis relies on, and the actual language of the resolution that says you can comply with either Chapter 3 or Chapter 13. And so I can hand out, if it's okay with the board members, I'll hand out a copy of the resolution adopting the 2018 code, or Mr. Wise can do that. Thank you. Thanks.
we'll see what he has.
And if I could ask the members to turn to page 3, and again, I'll represent to the board, this is a copy of the resolution 2018 adopting the and it's my understanding from the staff analysis that 302.7 is adopted by the city in this resolution is an additional requirement that's added on to the IEBC. And that's the basis for requiring, hey, everything's got to have a fire sprinkler system when you're talking about a remodel of level 2 and 3. But I'd like to turn your attention from there to page 6. Which the city adopted the performance compliance methods under Chapter 13. Specifically, the applicability of Chapter 13, and it's down at the bottom of page 6. 1301.2 is amended to read as follows. Applicability: existing buildings in which there is work involving additions, alterations, or changes of occupancy shall be made to conform to the requirements of this chapter, Chapter 13, or the provisions of Chapter 3 through 12. And when we talk about Chapter 3, that's 302.7. And so you can comply with either Chapter 3 through 12 or 13. And if we go through the IEBC Chapter 13, it's a scoring-based system where there are plus and minuses, and you have to get to a minimum score in order to pass under this alternative method. If you take the interpretation that we're talking about exists, that completely does away with Chapter 13. It makes it superfluous. It would never work, because you couldn't, there's plus and minuses. So if you don't meet one of the requirements, you could never get the score. There's just no reason to have it. And so by the city's own adoption of this code, it's not 302 only, it's Chapter 3 or Chapter 13. And especially when you're dealing with a building of this size, 600 square feet, outside egress, and I'm by no means would defer to many other people in the room on fire safety, but it seems specifically designed for this type of alternative, scoring system. Does it meet the minimum safety requirements even though it doesn't check the fire sprinkler box. And so I did I'm kind of a statute ordinance nerd. I like to look into the history of things. So I did a little bit of digging into the IEBC and looked at the 2018 author's comments. And I wanted to read to you, their comments with respect to the development of Chapter 13 and why they have it. So I would like to hand out a few excerpts from that, if you all don't mind. And I'll promise not to read all of it. I just wanted to have you to have it. I'm sorry I couldn't print out the official code. They're pretty strict about their copyright and making you pay for each copy. So just had a couple of excerpts from that.
Ask a question real quick. Just for our knowledge before we get into this, what level of alteration are we considering this? Level 1, 2, or 3?
It was more than 50% of the square footage was being altered, correct? So it'd be a level 3.
Yes. Yeah. It'd be a level 3. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, and if I go too fast, please stop me. Just very quickly, I wanted to read to the board, and draw their attention. And again, I'll represent to you that this is from the official comments from the IEBC authors, particularly on Chapter 13. And the second paragraph on the first page, talks about purpose. What's the purpose of Chapter 13? And again, that's been adopted by Oklahoma City as a compliance method. And it says a large number of existing buildings and structures do not comply with current building codes building code requirements for new construction. Although many of these buildings are potentially salvageable, rehabilitation is often cost prohibitive because they may not be able to comply with all the requirements for new construction. And that's exactly the situation that we're dealing with here. And then you skip on down, and I'd point to the last sentence in that paragraph, and it says, to accomplish this objective and to make the rehabilitation process easier, this chapter allows for a controlled departure from full compliance with the technical codes without compromising the minimum standards for fire prevention and life safety features of the rehabilitated building. And so this chapter, and if you dig into it, and I've got some other experts in here, and I don't want to spend everyone's time going through every excerpt from the code, but again, the 21 safety parameters, it's built on a system. You check the boxes. If you don't get fire sprinklers, you get a -6. So it's a big ding on your stat sheet. But again, even with the -6 for the sprinklers, this build, and as people smarter than me can talk about, meets the requirements. And so that's why we're asking. That's our interpretation of the code. And I know it may have not have been done before, but based on the plain language from the resolution, the performance compliance method authors, this would be a project that should be approved based on the applicability of the chapter.
Yes. Let's just tell them who you are.
I will tell you guys who I am. I'm the Director of Development Services. I'm also the Chief Building Official for the city. First time I met you guys. Nice to meet you. So I've been sitting here listening, and we're talking about the existing building code. The purpose of the existing building code is to be able to rehab existing buildings, right? And not have to meet the requirements of the current IBC. What I would like to say is that the performance measure or the performance method that they have, there's 3 different methods in the IABC. The performance, the design of that is to make that building as safe as possible without having to meet all the requirements. That's the purpose of it. That's why it exists. It's not making the building less safe by using that method. Sprinklers are not the end-all of all fires. Sprinklers are a great idea. They're a thing that keeps buildings safe and allows for people to get in the building or out of the building in a safe manner, but it's not the only way to protect a building. You have firewall protection, as you know, the fire protection specialist. You have firewall protection, you have smoke protection, you have all these different things that you can do in a building to protect it. I'm up here really kind of on behalf, not on behalf of them, but to reiterate what they're saying, that I agree with that. I think that the idea that the city has put this in place, this sprinkler system, is a great idea. The purpose of it was intentional, but there's also the existing building code that we've adopted, which allows us to redo buildings that have been existing, all these downtown buildings that are going to be redone over the years, all the buildings across the entire city. That's why the authors of the existing building code, the ICC, tons of engineers, tons of fire protection specialists, got together and they figured out a plan to try to be able to make it where these buildings can be affordably redone in the safest manner possible. And that's really what we're talking about today. The building's not going to be any less safe whether it has a sprinkler system or they use the prescriptive or the performance compliance method or the levels of alteration or the change of occupancy, which are kind of the four things that are talked about in the existing building code. So as you think about this and you're going to vote on this, keep that in mind, because I think that's the most important element, is that this building is not going to be less safe because it doesn't have sprinkler systems. It's just a different approach, a different way of looking at it, a different type of fire protection system in place, a different way of looking at it. So I just wanted to add that because I was sitting back here thinking about all this, and this is a very important thing. It also sets a precedence of what we can do in the future with buildings downtown, with buildings across the city that are, that we're going to have to rehab. But take that all in consideration. Anyway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Kyle, I'll say one thing as well. Of course, as operating as the clerk for the board, I stay neutral. I try not to get involved, but I do want to clarify one thing about the language that was brought up. The amended section 1301.2 was brought up by the gentleman here. It does say or, so there is a conflict between two adopted amendments in the same code. I just want to make sure that's understood.
So
I'm looking at the verbiage that was in the staff report and the verbiage that's in the document we were handed by the applicant concerning the amended code. I've lost my place. I'm just wondering what the difference, if there is any difference between the verbiage we were handed in the staff report or this.
Yeah, so Kyle, I will state in the staff report, I did not cover the Chapter 13 amendment because that was missed. That word or was missed by, I believe, myself and the staff. So we have the first amended section, 302.7, which is referenced in the staff report, which is listed in Chapter 3, which covers all three methods of compliance, the points-based, prescriptive, and scope of work compliance methods. The second amendment, which includes the word or, was written specifically for the points-based system, Chapter 13. So again, that's where the conflict comes up.
So you're saying that it is a legal alternative to sprinklers?
That's for the board to decide, not me.
That's what we have to decide. Yeah. So requirements and alterations. Yeah, but I can't remember if level 3.
Hi guys, my name is Shane LeBeth. I'm the architect on the project, 3241 Southwest 93rd. I think it was interesting to think through the project whenever we were discussing this with the owner, and that word "or" was a big element in us kind of moving forward. It did show that there was an option of the Chapter 13 versus the Chapter 3, and ultimately, this was the first time we went through and scored all of the points, and we went through it, learned a little bit about how it all worked. So it was interesting that, kind of like the chief building official was saying, is that we're designing a safe building. You know, there are firewalls, there are horizontal fire separation between the first and second floor. And we really thought through these 21 critically important elements and thinking through the level of safety. And I can't remember who said it, but just the idea of losing points because you didn't have fire suppression or different things. It was an interesting way to look at it, but we have a similar way of approaching it, about it being a different way of providing a level of safety for this, and really what Trey was talking about with regard to building back this area, rehabilitating buildings in this area that is needed. And so I just wanted to reiterate that we are building a building that's safe and may not have been done before, but that or made a big difference in our mind as well.
Yeah, I do, and 13. Or, I think that's,
Scott, I was also glad that you headed them up. I was glad that somebody went through and checked our math. That was
I'm
good.
gonna go back to the alterations level again. It's been a while since I've used the IABC for anything. Is there any hierarchy of compliance with, say, level 3? You also have to comply with level 2 or level 1, or is it standalone?
No, that is correct. Each of the 3 levels builds off of the one prior.
Okay, so
Those are not relevant if they use the performance or the.
Correct.
That's a third option.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're saying that chapter 7, 8, and 9 can be, the performance is in lieu of anything in those chapters?
Correct, yeah.
Correct,
And
okay.
I'll reiterate that for Brock, since I know the mics probably didn't pick him up, but he did say that, yes, the 7, 8, and 9 are not covered under the points-based method. That's one of the 3, so, yeah.
Okay. Because looking at it, there are very specific requirements in the alteration levels in chapter 7 and 8, so that's why I was asking the question.
Mike Wilson with the Fire Marshal's Office again. This has not been brought up to us. I'm not aware, and this needs more research. I don't agree with Mr. Rowe about the intent of the code. The fire department in Oklahoma City has been very adamant about fire suppression in residential occupancies. And if we need more research on this to actually look at this, I mean, it's not something that I'm going to be able to come up with, at the drop of a hat kind of thing. This is a big issue that we have required tons of multifamily dwellings to be sprinkled. And if you're trying to say that the code doesn't require that at all now, that's a big issue. So we would like, if the board feels this is something that needs to be considered more, that we would like to be continued so that we can have time to research this issue and get legal opinions. I'm not a lawyer. But I also know that the next code change is going to have different language in it. If this is the argument that's going to be brought up, we're going to take care of it before it gets here.
Well, Scott, I was going to ask, if we're just now realizing that there's the word "or" exists in here, this sounds like it's an administrative. You guys look at the compliance, you decide whether or not you think the compliance meets. It's an administrative decision. I don't know that they need a variance to make that happen.
I mean, it very well could be, yes. Yeah, I mean, that could be an internal decision as the AHJ.
If it was in contest with, what the city felt and whether or not the city was following the code, obviously that's what this board exists for, is to determine if there are discrepancies like that need to have a resolution. But if it's something that is apparently clear now. And you, as the authority having jurisdiction, can make a determination as to, evaluating what you're presented in terms of the performance side. I don't know that they need a variance at this stage. Now, I also understand what Mike is saying too. I mean, if the intent has always been for the city to, at least from the fire marshal side of the city, that under no circumstances shall you build a residential unit that does not, that's not sprinkled, then that sounds like a city issue that needs to be hashed out, So, I don't know that you need to continue something that doesn't need our input.
2000 or 2003, that the ICC went from just having a Chapter 34 that addressed existing buildings to pulling all that out and creating a separate international existing building code so that it wasn't actually in the building code anymore. They made a separate book. I think so they could sell more. But that's, that has changed how that amendment was written, because originally it was in Chapter 34. Then it had to change when it went to the International Existing Building Code. And the intent on the board, the Building Code Commission, the fire department, was that this was for all, if a permit was required, this is in all cases, this was a required fire suppression for that. And originally it was the remodel area, and then it changed to the fire area, which just basically increased it. So used to you could just sprinkle maybe one unit and have a 1 hour rating around it and just sprinkle the fire area you were remodeling. But then it changed to create that the fire area had to be sprinkled, which now goes basically back to a 2 hour wall. So a lot of times they'll have to sprinkle, partially a whole floor or partially the whole building. It just depends on what kind of walls they have. But we would like to study this more. Hadn't been discussed with us, so.
So I see the council is.
Yes. To your question, I think these 3 items are all related. You can continue them all in one motion if that's your desire. I don't think based on the conversation, I think it's kind of clear on what needs to take place as far as staff's concerned. I don't think you need to necessarily include anything in your motion other than just continue it to be replaced once we get our ducks in a row.
So if staff makes the decision that they can resolve it administratively, or there is no...
That's right. It doesn't necessarily need to come
Then it
back,
doesn't
right?
have
It
to
could
go,
be
okay. All right.
withdrawn by the applicant if that's...
All right.
But
Allowing it to continue would at least save them from having to resubmit if a resolution wasn't found outside.
So do we have a motion to continue? I mean, I'm assuming that's okay with the applicant?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing again.
I'm assuming a continuance so the city can make a decision amongst themselves on whether or not they can resolve it without our involvement. That would be what the continuance, the motion will be, is to continue the case until the planning department can make a decision on the actual verbiage in the code. Whether they agree with it or not, and they may just say they agree with it and it's done.
On behalf of my client, obviously, a quicker decision and decision applying plain language of the code as written and adopted by the city would be our preference. I certainly understand the notion that you're talking about.
Well, I hope you understand.
The decision is the best.
Yeah, I hope you understand, I can't force a motion out of anybody.
I get, of course.
Make a motion to continue.
Second.
Do we have a,
Continue.
Yes.
are you doing 3 separate motions, or do you want to continue all 3 items?
Motion to continue all 3 items.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And second.
Okay, Austin was first, Patrice second. Kyle Lombardo,
Yes.
Tommy Willis,
Yes.
Patrice Zimmerman,
Yes.
Jim McVerden,
Yes.
Austin Burton,
Yes.
and Weber.
Yes.
Okay, it passes.
The case will be continued then. And hopefully your resolution will come rather quickly from the city.
We appreciate everyone's time and consideration.
So that takes care of all the cases. I think that's all that's on our agenda today.
There was the option to hear the bylaws, but we haven't spoken with legal or had enough time to get with them on our end of the city, so.
So does anybody have any questions concerning that? Scott hasn't had time to present everything, so do you?
I still have some questions that I was going to talk to legal about. Scott recommended I just talk to him that we didn't discuss before. We didn't come to a resolution before.
So do we want to just have a motion just to
Bring it,
continue as is, and we will bring this up after everybody's had a chance to review? Okay, I don't think, do we need a motion for that, council? No. So the next order of business then would be adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Show of hands? Yes? It's unanimous. We're adjourned.